What's up, everybody? I'm Reverend Nia.
I'm Minister Wallace.
My name is Reverend Tiff, and welcome to Millennial Conversations.
Millennial Conversations is a Bible study specifically for young adults where we teach through dialogue and have candid conversations from an emerging generation of leaders.
Be sure to repost and share with the hashtag RTMC. That means Read Temple Millennial Conversations. And don't forget to engage with us in the chat.
You can tune in to our Read Temple website, Facebook page, and YouTube channel every Thursday at 7 p.m. So grab your pens,
grab your notebooks,
and join us for tonight's rap session. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Millennial Conversations. We had to take 1 week off because of the 72nd session of the Washington Annual Conference. And so tonight is where we pick back up and continue our discussion about mental health matters. We are so grateful for the young adult Black men that was able to share with us 2 weeks ago, and tonight we pick back up just a few days after Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to all the millennial mothers out there. As we pick back up on mental health matters, tonight we have a special guest with us, and I want her to introduce herself at this time.
Hey everybody, name is Tynesha Williams. Little bit about myself. Originally from upstate New York, been in Baltimore area or Maryland area for about 15 years. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor. Been in the field for maybe over 10 years. I'm a mom of two. I have an 8-year-old, a 2-year-old, a wife. So juggle many roles. And in addition to that, praise be to God, definitely am a recent a founder of my private practice, which is called Simply Becoming Counseling, where I provide therapeutic services to adults.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations on the new private practice. God be praised for that. And so tonight, as we talk about mental health matters, we're going to actually do a little bit of the highlighting of Tynesha as a millennial mother, while also talking about mental health matters, because mental health matters. And so you said you've been in this field for about 10 years. So what made you want to become a mental health professional?
Yeah, so I smile every time I get asked that question, because I never even envisioned to be a counselor. I ended up, to make it short and concise and brief, I didn't think anything of it. I ended up starting out and going to school for health education, and I just really always growing up, always had a passion for people, always knew very clear as a preacher's kid, knew very clear that God had a purpose for me very early. So I always knew that, had a passion for people, knew my spiritual gifts right away. And I just had a consistent prayer, like, Lord, I know you've called me to do something great. I know it has to do with empowering people. So Lord, you just use me in the way to see fit. So anyway, fast forward, got into health education just because I saw in my community so many of people and immediate family members just navigating through life and doing it in silence. So I just was like, this is a way that I can kind of help encourage and empower people to kind of live healthy, whole lives. So I got into health education, taught for 5 years. After teaching for 5 years, my husband and I transitioned to Baltimore, where I was trying to get in grad school for public health. But I kept getting rejection letters, and I was like, you know what, Lord, what's going on? What's going on? Mm-hmm. So I ended up just going through a season of wilderness, and I ended up getting contacted with the church that I was connected to at the time, got involved in a 2-year lay counseling training, and that's where the passion kind of ignited. So I was like, Lord, you want me to go to school to be a counselor? So ended up going to do that, and the door opened right up. So here I am, years later in the fields, and have the great privilege and honor of just really walking alongside people as they're like navigating through life.
Awesome. And I hear a lot of mirroring testimonies from people who decided to take on a profession. Seemingly there was one thing, and then it didn't work out the way you thought it was going to work out, but then here you are.
Yeah, here you are, right.
Doing exactly what you have always felt a burden or a calling for. And so over 10 years, and they may have changed over the 10 years, but what are your areas, or what is your current area of expertise?
So currently, well, I'll just go back at the beginning stages when I got into the field. I've always had a passion and desire for kids. I used to teach middle school and high school house. I just always had a passion. So I ended up just starting off working with kids, and I say kids, I call them littles, the younger ones to middle school to young adults. And that's really where I just really was passionate in that area. So I did that for a couple of years. And of course, just working on coping skills, working on identifying emotions, all of those different things there. But then just recently decided to kind of change it up a little bit. And with my private practice, I work with adults, and I usually tend to kind of work with individuals who are dealing with anxiety, depression, trauma. And one of the things that what I specialize in is just really helping them to develop practical tools and skills that kind of navigate through their seasons of change. We know change is inevitable. We're always transitioning and moving through different phases of our lives. So that is not solely, but that's what I kind of focus on, helping them identify boundaries, develop boundaries, self-love, self-care. These are things that we focus on in the private practice right now.
Awesome. That's great. And I'm glad you mentioned where you started out, your expertise specifically being with children, because oftentimes I can put it back to the most current thing. So I was watching something on TV. I forgot the name of it. But the parent, who was a younger parent, was trying to determine whether or not she should take her son to see a therapist.
Yeah.
Because the boy's father wasn't in his life, and he was 2 years old, but he was having some behavioral issues in his classroom. And so, when she was talking to her aunt about it, she's like, "Auntie, we don't do therapy.
Right.
Not in the Black community. We don't do therapy. We don't take our children to therapy. We don't talk about mental health stuff." And so I want to talk about maybe any advice you can offer millennial parents who may be considering any forms of therapy for their children, and what helpful tools from your professional work as a child therapist could be helpful for parents who may be considering it for one reason or another.
Yeah, I would definitely start off by encouraging. I always do, like when I was working with kids, just encouraging parents, guardians, caregivers to understand the benefits. I think, like you said, a lot of times there is a negative connotation that comes along. Have we made progress in the years? Yes, we have. But yes, you're right. There is a negative connotation a lot of times with getting therapy in our community sometimes. So I think a lot of times at the beginning stages, I think it's very important to kind of be aware of what the benefits are. A lot of times we might think, oh, they're acting up in school, or there has to be, if they've experienced all of this trauma, then they need to go. But there's so many benefits to allowing your child, or just opening up that door for them to be able to go. Just some of the benefits off the top of my head. It can be an opportunity for them to organize their thoughts. It can provide a safe space for them to be able to process their thoughts and their feelings. It can be it can be an opportunity for them to understand themselves, or to gain perspective, or develop the social skills that they need to be able to implement in life. So I always just kind of start there, if that makes starting there. But then I also kind of encourage parents and guardians as well, is to understand that getting therapy for your child in no means does that mean that you're less of a parent, if that makes sense. I always try to help parents kind of reframe their thinking on that and look at it as an opportunity where you're going to be utilizing some resources and a support system that can help you be able to help your child navigate through their season that they're in, or the stage of life that they're in.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that too, said that as well, because I found sometimes, even in my experience, that when it comes to children with behavioral issues, that sometimes for some people, it automatically stems from some type of mental health discrepancy.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in perpetuating that stigma all the time for children who have behavioral issues. And of course, I used to be a school teacher as well. And so I've been in the school system setting where you have those children who have behavioral issues because of things that are happening at home, because of different traumatic experiences. And yes, those children may benefit from seeing a therapist or a different other therapeutic related activities, as you mentioned, that will help them to get a handle on their emotions or the way they or even their thoughts as children. I think what sometimes we don't understand is that children may be children, but they do have thoughts and they do have feelings, and they need to be validated. And I think oftentimes, sometimes it could be that they're lacking maybe even just validation, maybe just somebody to come alongside them and say it's okay to feel a certain way, even if they don't know how to what's the word I'm looking for? Communicate it.
Yeah. And two, when I'm like working with like the child and the parent, that is so true. A lot of times I always encourage parents, a practical thing that they can do. I'm a very practical person, and that overflows into counseling, because I always say the true therapy starts outside of the session, if that makes sense.
Perfect sense.
But I think a practical thing that I encourage parents all the time is to just create time and space to connect with their child. Undivided attention, because you'll be surprised. That kind of creates a space for them to be open, to be transparent, and be able to talk with them. So just really, that's a practical thing. But then I also encourage parents also is, when they're coming to you, don't always feel like you have to always fix the very thing that they're coming to you for. Just to piggyback off of what you were saying, it could be they just need comfort. They just need to be heard. They just need to be validated, because a lot of times that's the thing that comes up in therapy. Well, they just don't understand. They don't listen. They don't understand. And I always encourage parents to understand the gift of being present is such a gift. And really just being present and just being available to them can do wonders.
I agree. And again, I'm not a mental health professional, but again, I've had a number of experiences in the school system, outside of the school system, and even in serving in ministry as youth pastor and serving in ministry as young adult leader, have come across a number of things wherein I've been able to see both sides.
Absolutely.
The side where it's like, yeah, you might want to talk to a mental health professional, but I've also seen the side where they really just wanted somebody to listen. They really just wanted somebody to have an open ear. Even when I was teaching in middle school, I remember one girl, she was in the 6th grade. She just came to my classroom 20 minutes before class started. And I was like, what's going on? And she just broke down crying. And I was like, all right, so you need to talk. So I closed the door.
Yeah.
And she broke down crying. I'm too young for this. I got to take care of my little brother, my little sister. I got to cook dinner. I got to take out the trash. I got to do my homework. And then by the time my mom gets home, she don't have time to talk to me and listen to me about my problem.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what she said to me. And so for me and for her, I was more than the teacher. I was the one that just sat and listened to her say everything that she can't tell her mama, because her mama gets home so late and she's exhausted as a 6th grader from taking care of herself and 2 younger siblings. And so, anybody could have easily said, oh, she needs to see a therapist. That baby didn't need no therapist. She just wanted somebody to talk to, somebody that would listen to her. Yeah. Because she didn't feel like she was being heard at home.
Yeah. And I'll say this as a mom myself, I get it. For many of us, there are so many moving parts of life, right? I get it. There's so many moving parts of life. And that's just that's a struggle that I have to kind of be mindful of, is even for myself as a therapist, as a mom, as a wife, is just kind of really carving out that time to kind of just be present and be available. Because I always say my ministry also is my children. Yeah. That is a ministry itself. And me, just as much as I pour into my clients and walking alongside them, I have to be just as intentional to make sure that I'm doing that in my own household as well.
Facts. And I'm so glad you said that. Y'all, I hope y'all listening. Make sure y'all share, repost, use the hashtag RTMC, hashtag mental health matters. This is some good stuff that we're talking about this month. This is some good stuff we're talking about tonight. So I hope y'all are listening. So you mentioned being a mom. So let's talk about the intersection between motherhood and mental health matters.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, well, you kind of already alluded to it, so you can just take it from there. Let's just talk about the intersectionality between motherhood and mental health matters.
Yeah, so I think for a lot of times, like I said, I work solely with adults right now, and a lot of times what comes up with clients that I'm working with is time. I'm overwhelmed. I am juggling a lot. I am wearing so many caps. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. How am I going to be present for everybody? And then let alone you telling me to practice some self-care. What does that look like? So what I find a lot of time with just, mental health and motherhood and how they intersect is the roles that we play. And whether for individuals who are not moms or not, we all mother in some way. Does that make sense? We have nieces, we have nephews, whether you're a teacher, whatever capacity that is, it's easy for us to kind of operate in those roles a lot of times. And it's even more important to make sure, just as much as we're pouring out, to make sure that we're pouring in to ourselves. Because a lot of times what comes up in session is, I poured out so much, the very thing that goes on the back burner for me is self-care and taking care of myself. So therefore, I'm burnt out, I have nothing to give, but I'm still moving and I'm still grinding, if that makes sense. So that's one thing I would just have to say, definitely one thing is just giving yourself permission to be able to find what that balance looks like. Mm-hmm. Because what'll happen is a lot of times is the guilt comes up. Well, I got to do this for this person, do this for this person. And then self-care is something that is not taken just as important for other people. So I would say that's one thing that's definitely one thing is just really finding balance in that way of taking care of yourself and giving yourself permission to be able to do that. Another thing that comes to mind, I think about, and I'm just thinking about just some of the recent clients that I've been working with just recently who've just had babies, mm-hmm. if that makes sense. And oftentimes just walking alongside new moms as they are maybe dealing with postpartum depression. We think of motherhood, it can bring up so many, it's life-changing. It can be life-changing in so many ways. It can bring up feelings of joy and excitement, but then on the other hand, for some people, it can bring up sadness, it can bring up depression, it can bring up guilt, it can bring up all of those different things, and just really trying to help navigate them in that way. I was listening to I was reading an article not too long ago, and it was simply saying how 1 in 8 women struggle with postpartum depression.
Wow.
But for women in the minority community, in the minority community, it's 2 times that likely of white women.
Wow.
So it's something that is very prevalent among African-American mothers or minority mothers, but it's something that maybe is not always reported due to like feelings of embarrassment, of shame, of so many different things. So it's definitely prevalent, and just really just understanding that it is a change. It definitely is a change. It's a change in responsibilities, expectations, identity. It can definitely be a lot. So just in my profession, just being able to kind of normalize that, number one, help them to understand what the signs and the symptoms are, and then kind of just walking alongside them to kind of figure out what are some coping skills or what are some things that we can do together to kind of minimize some of those symptoms. And I say for those who may not be connected right away with therapy, there are great benefits. Studies show that there are great benefits to getting linked up with somebody if you are experiencing symptoms of maybe, and let me say, postpartum can happen during pregnancy and it can happen after as well. So I would say if that is the case where you're feeling sadness or excessive crying or easily agitated, easily, angered, or isolating yourself, or these are some of the common things that's coming up, is definitely checking with your primary care physician, and then think about therapy, think about a support group.
Yeah, oftentimes I think people don't consider support groups because number of things. So 1, they don't know they're available.
Very true.
2, they're not aware of the resources. 3, they don't want to be vulnerable with others that they don't know.
Absolutely.
We're not likely to be vulnerable with strangers.
Mm-hmm.
And those typically, and in my experiences, those are the top 3 reasons why I ain't doing no support group. It's typically what comes up. But those support groups are oftentimes services that are offered where you don't need insurance.
Yeah.
Where there's not a sliding pay scale.
Absolutely.
So you can tap into your local churches may have support groups of some sort. Your local churches may have, I know at my church, we have what we call grief share.
Yeah.
And so those are, I believe they're like small group sessions for people who are dealing with some level of grief.
Yes.
And grief is not always somebody died. It's whatever causes a grievance for your life. So a grief could be, I've had this friend for 22 years and now we're not friends no more. A grievance could be, I lost my job. That's a grievance. I was in a car accident. That's a grievance. Like there's just so many different ways we could look at grief, but oftentimes, people always attribute it to
a loss of a loved one or, someone close. But like you said, it could be a dream. It can be an expectation. It can be so many different things. So I'm glad you definitely brought that up. But I love what you said about but the benefit of a support group is not only can it provide insight, but it can provide connection as well. And that's the different, although you can get insight from, insight from doing therapy, but it's something around being around other individuals who are going through the same thing can kind of build that support that is needed.
Right, because in addition to that, to you being around people who can relate to you, it also leaves you with the feeling like I am not alone in this world.
Sure.
I am not the only one dealing with this. I'm not the only one who's lost a loved one, who's lost a job, who's dealing with a grievance of any kind. And so in essence, that also provides a sense of comfort. For some people, it provides a sense of peace for them. Mm-hmm. And then again, that support group could be therapeutic. And again, it's not about always laying on somebody's couch talking about your feelings. Yeah. Sometimes it's just being able to name the thing that's really causing you grief, or name the thing that's causing you problems. And quite frankly, I always say the first step is admittance.
Absolutely.
Being able to just say, I'm sad. I'm depressed. Yes. I feel lonely. Like to be able to just name it for what it is always the beginning step for any type of healing or any type of holistic health related things that are needed for yourself. I think the first step is always admittance.
Absolutely. Can I piggyback off of what you just said? And I say that a lot of times as well. You are absolutely right. I totally agree. Admitting that. But then also when we're talking about support, talking about a support system, then it's another level to kind of be vulnerable and share that with our trusted people. We know who our trusted people are. Does that make sense? But it's a lot of times what happens is we assume people know how to show up for us. Mm-hmm. But it requires us, like you said, to be able to be vulnerable, to say, listen, to be aware, what is it that you need in this season? You know what I mean? And really kind of articulating that so people can have the opportunity to show up in that way.
Absolutely. Completely agree. One question and I believe we're going to run out of time shortly. But one other thing I would like to ask is, what advice can you offer millennial mothers? You're a millennial mother yourself, millennial mothers or just millennials, period, who may feel like this session is talking for me, or what Tianisha has had to say has been very helpful for my life, and I've been suffering in silence. I've not told anybody. I've just been dealing with this. The single mom who just recently had a baby, who's dealing with things on an emotional level, but don't feel vulnerable enough, or don't have a circle of support, doesn't have a care team of people that are assigned to her to help her really navigate through that. So what advice can you offer for the millennial mom, the millennial period, who may be suffering in silence as it relates to mental health matters? Yeah.
I think I would say one thing, and one thing would be in the process is be kind to yourself. Mm-hmm. I always say that. I always remind my clients of that, is just really being kind to yourself. When it comes down to motherhood, it's no guide. We don't have a guide to show you do this if they do this. So really just kind of really being kind to yourself, giving yourself grace. And like I said, just be prayerful. I can say that in this arena, but be prayerful. If you don't have that support system, really be prayerful. Lord, who is it that I can connect to me, and that I can connect with in this season to be a support. If he shows you if and when, because I know that's the type of God that we serve, right? Because he wants us to be, in community with people. But when he shows us that individual or gives us that guidance, to give yourself permission to be able to be vulnerable, open up, and then be able to tell people what it is that you need in that season. But then, like you said, this goes back to supports of the church. Is that stretching out of your comfort zone and maybe connecting to a small group, or I don't know what some churches call them, small groups, cell groups, and in that way as well. So just kind of linking up, because sometimes we may have the people around us, but are we kind of tapping in and letting them know that we need them?
Yeah, and I can certainly, moment of transparency, I can certainly attest to the fact that I've not always been so apropos to reaching out to people if I'm not having the best of moments, and being, one who lives on my own. And so it's like, if I'm not having, especially, oh my gosh, I struggled big time at the beginning of the pandemic, and nobody knew about it.
Yeah.
Nobody didn't talk about it. I didn't call nobody and say, hey, this is a bad day. Nobody knew I cried for 3 nights straight. Nobody knew I didn't sleep for 3 nights straight. I went to sleep and woke up, and now I went to sleep. No, I'm sorry. I never went to sleep. The sun went down and came back up, and I was still awake.
Yeah.
And so my sleeping patterns were completely off, and I never talked about it. I never shared with anybody. And it wasn't that I didn't feel I could be vulnerable. It wasn't that I didn't feel nobody could relate, because apparently the whole world was relating. But it was just giving myself permission to say, Nia, reach out to somebody.
Reach out to somebody. And listen, if they're not available, it's okay. Don't let that don't let that hinder you from reaching out to somebody else.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we'll say, well, I tried. Okay, well, maybe try again if that makes sense. So it requires us to kind of step out of our comfort zone. And I love what you said. I always tell my clients that all the time. Give yourself permission to do. You fill in the blank what that is. And that's a lot of times, that's what people need when they come into therapy. It's like, you know what, thank you for, give yourself permission to be able to feel, to sit. If you don't have anybody, give yourself permission to kind of write down how you're feeling in a notebook or a journal. Because I always tell people, even if it's not a verbal thing, it's still a way to kind of release.
Yeah.
Write a prayer or a letter to God in that way. He's still, he's still there. I always say that. Still be in communion with him. He's there.
Absolutely. I could not have even said that any better myself, because at the end of the day, I'm one who says I believe in Jesus and a therapist. I believe in Jesus and therapeutic practices. I believe in Jesus and holistic health. And so, yes, as a grown-up, I'm not ashamed to admit it. Judge your auntie. I have coloring books. I have crayons. I have color pencils.
Did you say Legos? I have Legos on my end. Yeah.
Listen, I have Pac-Man video game. I have Nintendo NES with the original Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 3 and 4 on. Listen, whatever it takes to allow me to get to a space where I'm okay, I do it.
And I'll add this, and I know we're running out of time. I always share with my clients, when it comes down to self-care, that's going to look different each day. That can look different each day.
Yep.
So one thing is not always going to work. So I think that's the benefit of being in therapy, is you're creating a toolbox of different things that you can put in, different coping skills that you can use, so that when life happens, you can go in your box and pick out different things that you can implement. But it's not always going to be one thing. And we know that from the pandemic, is the thing that worked for us at one point in the pandemic, we was tired of that thing.
Listen,
right? Okay, we all can identify with that.
Absolutely. And I completely agree, because coloring it might not do it one day. One day I might be dealing so heavy. I'm like, no, I just need to go for a drive with the windows down and blasting something ratchet on the playlist, Or it could be, I just need to go run a hot bath, light some candles. It could be, I need to go do a 2-mile hike in the park. It could, like you said, it could look different every day.
Every day.
The point of maintaining holistic mental health as a mother or as just an individual is to just be intentional. Yeah.
And can I say that? That's so key when it comes down to being a mom. That's the greatest gift that you give, is taking care of yourself. Because I know for myself, and I'm gonna be full transparent, when I'm not taking care of Ty, I'm short. I am, very agitated, but it's something about when I'm taking care of myself, I can be more present, I can be more at peace, and that overflows into how I'm communicating with my husband, how I'm communicating with my kids. So once again, that goes back to taking care of self. When we're doing all of these mini roles and juggling all of this, at the end of the day, if that's 10, 15 minutes, I love what you said, intentionality. Don't do it until you at your breaking point. You know what I mean? And then that's when a lot of us like to kind of implement it once life has happened and we had a breaking point. But be intentional about implementing that on a day-to-day basis. And it's not always about getting your hair and nails done. That can be, like you said, getting in the bath, putting your kids to bed early, and you watching your favorite TV show. Instead of cooking, getting takeout. So those are just some practical things.
Listen, and I'm here for all of them. I'm over here like, yep, that's what I do. Yep, that's what I do. Listen, Ty, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure, my honor, yes.
All the time we have on today, but listen, guys, we don't ever want to take for granted that, we mentioned God, we talk about Jesus, we talk about the Bible, we talk about church experiences. We don't ever want to take for granted that everybody that's tuning in has a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. And so if that's you on tonight and you don't have a relationship with God, you don't know what it means to be saved, you are unsure if you're saved, I invite you to make a bold faith move right now and type in the chat, "It's me." Maybe you're already saved and are sure about it, but you don't have a church home where you're growing, a body of believers that you can be connected to that will help keep you uplifted, encouraged, and accountable. If that's you and you believe the Lord is leading you to the Temple AME Church, won't you make a bold faith move and type in the chat, "It's me." Maybe you're already saved, have a church home where you're growing, not just where you're going, but you want to recommit or rededicate your life back to Christ. What does that mean? That literally just means you and Jesus had a functioning relationship, but y'all broke up. And you started living your life like it was golden. But guess what, my dear brother, my dear sister? The saving grace is God, Jesus, has never left his position, just waiting for you to come back. And so if that's you tonight that's saying, "God, I'm sorry, I tried this thing called life independent of you, but now I want to do this thing called life depending upon you." If that's you on tonight, won't you make a bold faith move and type in the chat, "It's me." Now, maybe you haven't grown as bold in your faith just yet, and that's perfectly fine. No judgment, no condemnation here. Just head on over to www.retemple.org/cares, and someone will most certainly be in communication with you and meet you at your point of need. Last and certainly not least, if you would like to sow a seed into the life of this ministry, not just Millennial Conversations, but that of Temple AME Church, so that we can continue the work of the Lord in the church as well as in the community, I will that you would take whatever amount God places upon your heart to sow, and that you would follow the directions on your screen and sow that seed at this time. Whatever you sow, just make sure you do so and give it with a cheerful heart. Thank you again to Chania Williams for being with us on tonight. May God continue to bless you and your new practice. May God send every single client that is assigned to you into your care. May God do so in an expeditious manner just for you, and that he will continue to show himself strong and mighty in your life, in the life of your family, and in the life of your budding business. Listen, thank you all for joining us tonight. Tune in next week for another Millennial Conversations as we continue to talk about mental health matters.